Hello, hello. Are we on? I think we're on. Sorry for that awkward intro. Hello, hello, hello. I'm Grant Faulkner. I'm executive director of NaNoWriMo. I'm here in my somewhat messy bedroom, but fortunately it's blurred out with Zoom technology. And we are here today to talk about story structure and plotting. And I have to admit that despite all of these novels I've written in my life and all of these novels I've written during NaNoWriMo, I am perhaps of all the craft elements most insecure about my plotting abilities. It's something I view as a true weakness, and it's a weakness that I hear from so many novelists and writers tell me that it's a weakness of theirs, and I've wondered why is that, but then when I really think about it, it's like you're writing a 200, 300, 400 page story, and to keep the plot engaging and compelling and titillating and spine chilling and all those things, that's tough. And no one is just a natural storyteller. Most people develop those skills by reading and by studying books like the one we're going to talk about today. Jessica Brody, our guest, first wrote Save the Cat for Novelists. It's one of the most popular books among NaNoWriMo writers. I see it all over Instagram. People read this to brainstorm their novel, as I do, and to even structure it after writing it. But we're very fortunate because she just came out with a new novel, especially for young adult novelists. Save the Cat writes a young adult novel. Just released, what was it, yesterday, I think? And it's already a #1 Amazon bestseller. So yeah, yay, Jessica. And Jessica happens to be just beneath me on the screen. Um, and I just want to introduce her. She is Jessica knew from a young age that she wanted to be a writer. She started self-publishing her own books when she was just 7 years old. And her first novel was called The Puppy and the Kitty. And I want to read that. I mean, yeah, what more do I want? I want a Netflix series on The Puppy and the Kitty. And it was complete with illustrations. But since then, she's written and published more than 20 novels for teens, tweens, and adults, including I Speak Boy, Better You Than Me, Addie Bell's Shortcut to Growing Up, The Chaos of Standing Still, 52 Reasons to Hate My Father, and the Unremembered Trilogy and the System Divine series. So catch up on her novelist. She's a very accomplished novelist. Beyond that, she lives with her husband and 3 dogs near Portland, Oregon. And perhaps more importantly, she loves speaking in a British accent, much to the annoyance of everyone around her. Welcome, Jessica. And are you going to do this webcast in a British accent?
Well, thank you. I didn't know you were going to pull out that random fact. No, I will spare everyone my British accent, mostly because I don't want to offend any Brits that are on the webcast today.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a special favor and one British accent for one question later in the webcast.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
No pressure, no pressure. But I'm going to turn it over to you because Jessica is going to do this fantastic presentation on plot, and then we're going to take your questions. So please put your questions in chat. And Catherine Grip, who's producing this, she will send us the questions, and we'll try to get all through the questions for Jessica after her presentation. So I'm going to sign off, Jessica, and learn about plot.
See you in a bit, Grant. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our live webcast on Plot Your Bestseller in 5 Steps. I'm going to get my presentation loaded up so we can get right into it. I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions at the end. All right, so here we're here to talk about using the Save the Cat method to write not just young adult novels, which is the topic of the week for me because my new book, Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult Novel, just came out, but how to write all novels using, actually, you only need 5 beats or 5 steps, and that's the focus of our presentation today. So a little history, I was not always good at structure either. It was a very, very difficult part for me in writing. And this is the proof right here. This is like my literal stack of rejection letters that I had received when I was trying to get an agent for my very first novel. I got rejected over 100 times by agents who basically all said the same thing. You don't know how to tell a story. You don't know how to structure a story. As Grant said, it is very difficult to do. So I was actually saved by a book called Save the Cat. It was introduced to me by a screenwriter friend who heard about my struggle to get my first novel represented and published and told me about this book by Blake Snyder, which essentially breaks down screenplays into 15 beats or plot points that form a blueprint that screenwriters can follow. Well, I read this book and I thought, actually, this would probably work for the novel that I'm trying to sell as well. And so I rewrote that novel using this methodology, this Save the Cat methodology, and I ended up getting an agent and selling that novel to a major publisher. This is me on the release day of my first book, way back when I was just a little bitty writer 20 years ago. And now here I am this year. I released my 20th novel. So yes, I would like to think that the method works because I have been using it for 20 books now, and I have sold over 20 novels to major publishers like Simon & Schuster, Random House, and Macmillan. So I am the living proof that Save the Cat does work for novels. But at the time, I didn't know if it would work for all novels. At the time I was using it, kind of in my height of using it, I had this question lingering in the back of my mind. Does this method work for all novels, or is it just that it happens to work for mine? Am I some sort of weird fluke? Maybe my books kind of read like screenplays and therefore it works. And that's when I started to dig a little deeper into this magic screenwriting method I had discovered. And I started to read books, famous books, classic books, favorite books, but looking at it through a slightly different lens. I started to read books through the lens of structure, specifically the Save the Cat structure method. So I've read hundreds and hundreds of books with this lens, but I studied books like mystery novels like The Girl on the Train, and horror like Stephen King, young adult romance, middle grade fantasy, even classics like The Grapes of Wrath. And here's the very interesting thing I found as I was reading and looking at these stories through the lens of story structure, is I found that they had sort of similarities. Like around 10% of the way through all of these novels I was reading, there was this life-changing event that sort of kick-started the plot. And then I found that around 20% of the way through all of these novels, the hero did something new, or went somewhere new, or tried something new. I found that around halfway through all of these novels, there was this big game-changing twist, like a midpoint twist. And I found that around 75, 3/4 of the way through all of these novels, the hero hit some sort of rock bottom or low point. And then I found that around 80 to 85% of the way through all these novels, the hero stumbled upon and found a resolution that they could act upon to fix all of the problems that they had encountered so far. So that's either a really, really weird coincidence, or I had stumbled upon something kind of cool. Basically, I'd stumbled upon a secret storytelling code, like a pattern, a DNA that's hidden within all great stories from the beginning of time. I have read novels as early as the 1600s, from the 1600s to as modern as today, and I found this same storytelling code appearing again and again and again in all of these stories. And that's when I realized that the method wasn't just a screenwriting method. It was a story structure method. It was a blueprint that could be used not just to analyze books like I was doing, but to write our own stories as well. So the method that the structure template that Blake Snyder found in his screenwriting, I found in novels. And Blake Snyder just gave these very important moments in the story just different names, like the catalyst, the break into 2, the midpoint, the all is lost, and the break into 3. So it's not necessarily a new thing. It's just a new codification of story, or it was for me. And these are the 5 points we're actually going to talk about today. So yes, I discovered that Save the Cat does work for all novels, not just my own. And that's when I wrote the book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which came out in 2018. And what I discovered, I discovered that this method was helping a lot of novelists, but that was a long time ago, 2018. And I've been writing and I've been doing webinars and I've been talking to novelists ever since. And I discovered a lot of new things that I hadn't really thought about before, just new ways to look at this structure method. I was answering a lot of questions that weren't answered in the first book. And I decided I wanted to write and publish another installment of Save the Cat for novelists. And so I wrote a new installment, which I kind of consider my second edition of Save the Cat. And I decided to center it around the young adult genre, or the young adult categorization. Now, even though this book does really focus on young adult examples, I actually think it's helpful for all novelists because it covers a lot of new things and new ways of looking at story structure that are not in the first book. So anybody who needs like a new way of looking at story structure, I think can benefit from this new book. And as Grant said, it released yesterday. So it's very exciting to have a new book out and people are excited about it. And it's really fun. So hang around for the end. I have a not so secret link that I'm going to share with you on how you can actually get 100 extra pages that were cut from this book that I've turned into a bonus ebook, and I'm giving those away for free. So you can find out how to get that at the end of the presentation today. Okay, so what exactly is the Save the Cat method? Well, as you can probably tell, it's a structure blueprint. For those of you unfamiliar with the method, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of exactly what it is. It's a series of plot points that can be found in almost every great story ever told, and that you can use yourself to structure your own novel. I like to think of it as a transformation machine, which basically means an imperfect hero goes into this thing that we call the beat sheet, this set of plot points, and a less imperfect hero comes out. It is a structure method that not only helps you plot your novel, but also guides you into telling a compelling character transformation or character arc for your story. The Save the Cat beat sheet is basically the heart of the method. It is 15 beats or plot points. We're going to talk about 5 of those today, and they are designed to help make your story more compelling, to help you with pacing, to help hold your reader's attention and leave your readers feeling satisfied, because they are built upon this storytelling code that is buried within the heart of all novels that readers already love. So readers are already, I would venture to say, pre-programmed to respond to these plot points told in this order. And that's why it's important that we know them so that we can put them in our own stories and hold our readers' attention as well. Contrary to popular belief, it's not just an outlining tool. It's also a great tool for revising your novel. If you're one of those discovery writers who don't like to outline in advance and you like to fly by the seat of your pants, or we like to call them pantsers, this is a great tool to bring out after you have a first draft, not necessarily before you start, but once you have some stuff to work with and then need to figure out how to structure it, how to make it work in the most dynamic way possible. That's when the Save the Cat method can really help you. All right, so what are we going to do today? As I mentioned, we're going to break down the 5 most important beats of the Save the Cat method, and you can actually use these beats as a structural foundation on their own. And they are the most important because I find they're the most important beats of the method. We're also going to break down some popular examples so that you can really solidify your understanding of these beats. Now, I've picked young adult examples for this specific presentation in honor of my new book, but these 5 beats work in every type of novel, young adult, middle grade, adult, and doesn't really matter. And if you want proof, you can go back to the original book where I break down a lot of adult novels as well. We're also going to discover how these beats form the foundation, the structural foundation of your story, and how the other beats will be built up around these 5 beats. And then at the end, we'll have some time to answer some questions. Okay, so it is my sincere hope that by the end of this webinar, you will walk away with a better understanding of what makes stories successful, which will allow you to tell your own story better, easier, faster, and with less of those bumpy roadblocks that we writers hate so much. Because what I'm going to be basically giving you today with these 5 foundation beats, these 5 plot points, is I'm going to be giving you an easy to follow blueprint that you can use to outline, write, or revise any novel of any genre for any age group. So let's dive in. Oh, I almost forgot. Before we dive in, why is it called Save the Cat? For any of you who are new, you might be wondering this about now. For those of you who already know, just bear with me for a moment. Save the Cat is a writing tip that was included in the original screenwriting book that basically references the moment of the story when a hero does something redeeming, or the moment when the audience or reader gets behind the hero of your story. So the metaphor is that your hero, if they're unlikable, you need to have them save a cat. Not literally. They could, but not literally. They have to do something equally redeeming to get the reader behind your hero. So a famous example is from the movie Aladdin, where Aladdin is stealing a loaf of bread when we first meet him. He's not very likable. And what does he do at the end of this sequence? Well, he gives his loaf of bread to a starving mother and child, and voila, he has saved the cat. He has gotten us on his side. So is this the most important tip of the entire book? No, but it has the best title, so it goes on the cover. All right, so these 5 foundation beats, what are they? They are the major turning points of your story. That means that they are the plot points that serve as the foundation of your novel structure, and that they are tent poles that hold up all the other beats. So as you remember, there are 15 beats that we don't have time to talk about all of them, but I think you'll find that just focusing on these 5 is a really good starting point for your novel, for your revision plan, because I like to give these 5 beats particularly to new writers or writers who don't like to outline or who are maybe a little bit nervous about structure. This is a great starting point. When you can get that foundation laid, you'll be amazed at how the rest of your story falls into place when you build it around these foundational beats. I also think that they're the easiest to identify in other stories and within our own stories. And I think as we get into it, you'll see why. They are kind of the more obvious beats of the structure method. And to be perfectly honest with you, these are the beats I start with when I start any of my own brainstorms. I don't sit down and just brainstorm all 15 beats in order. I actually start with these foundation beats because they form the foundation of my structure, and then I can build the rest of my story around the beats. So hopefully you're excited about the beats by now. The overview, which we will go into each beat in more detail, but the beats are the catalyst, the break into 2, the midpoint, the all is lost, and the break into 3. Those are the 5 we're going to cover in detail today. So let's take a look. So how you're going to read these slides is you'll see the name of the beat across the top. Beneath that, you'll see our entire novel roadmap. If you're interested in where those beats fall within the 15 beat structure, that will show you. Our foundation beats are in squares. But if you don't want to worry about the rest of the beats, just ignore them for now and focus on those 5 that are highlighted. On the left-hand side, you'll see a percentage mark. That is roughly where in the novel this beat should fall. 10% of the way through for our first beat. And our first foundation beat is called the catalyst. So this means that essentially 10% of the way through your story, there should be some sort of big inciting incident that happens, a call to action, if you will. After this, the hero's life will never be the same. And that is a great way to test if you have an effective catalyst. Can your hero go back to the way things were before this moment without really any repercussions? If the answer is yes, your catalyst isn't big enough. We want to make sure that this is going to be the thing that launches the story organically. So we want it to feel big, and we want to make sure our hero's life can't be the same afterwards. So it's essentially big enough to break through the status quo of Act 1, which Act 1 is the status quo world. And this is the wrecking ball that will smash through it. So some popular choices you'll see in a lot of fiction: tragedies, phone calls that come in the middle of the night with bad news, breakups, divorce, a messenger at the door, or even an exciting opportunity that's presented. These are all great examples of things that it's hard to go back from. They change things. Because essentially the whole role of the catalyst is to send the story in a new direction. So the catalyst is done best when it's external, when it's something that is done to the hero that will force them to debate or reflect what to do next, and will eventually, in the next beat we're going to talk about, push them out of their comfort zone and into a new world. So I highlighted that external moment there. This is a huge part of your external story, this catalyst. It needs to be something that happens to the hero from the outside. So we don't really want our catalyst to be something like my hero realizes or my hero thinks about, because those are internal beats. That's an internal thing. We want something happening to them that's going to push them forward. So let's look at some examples. I have pulled some examples to study today. The first one I've pulled is the Hunger Games, mostly because everyone knows it, and the beats are so easy to identify. So it's a great one to kind of get your firm understanding of the beats in action. So it's actually the same catalyst for the book and the movie. That's how effective it was. It's when Prim's name is called at the reaping. We all remember this heart-wrenching moment. And life can really never be the same after this. It's not like Katniss can go back to her life in District 12 and go, oh, well, Prim, have fun. I hope you do well in the Hunger Games. No, she cannot. So this is a very, very great example of a catalyst. But this is also a big plot-driven, action-oriented sci-fi book. So how does a catalyst, what does it look like in maybe a quieter, contemporary, character-driven story? Well, for that, we're going to look at a very successful book called To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han, which you might know has been turned into a phenomenally successful Netflix series. The books are also awesome. In this book, the catalyst happens when Laura Jean's secret love letters are accidentally sent out to all the boys she's loved before. Who sent them out? We won't know until the end. At this point, it feels like an accident, but it is a very important accident because it is the accident that's going to push her out of her comfort zone and into this story. Because included in those letters is the one she wrote to her secret crush, Josh, who happens to be her sister's ex-boyfriend. So talk about drama. These are not world-ending stakes. This is not the Hunger Games, but it is a huge moment for this girl's life. And that's what's important to note about the catalyst, because it is the event that turns her life upside down and will push her into the next beat, which is the break into two. This is our next foundation beat. It is our next turning point in the story, and it comes roughly around the 20% mark. So around 20% of your story, your hero should proactively decide to do something. Now, when they decide to do something, it usually comes in the form of accepting a call to action or an invitation, leaving their comfort zone, trying something new, venturing into a new world or a new way of thinking, or it could be something that includes all of the above. But the theme here is new. It needs to feel different from where we just were, which is Act 1, because now we are crossing a threshold from Act 1, the status quo world, where things are the way that they were at the beginning, into Act 2, the upside down world, where things should feel very, very different, because we're cueing our reader here that this story is moving forward. We are venturing into a new world. So it's important to note that when your hero proactively decides to do something at this beat, that they are still motivated by something that they want, not something that they need. What does that mean? Let's take a little bit closer look at want and need. The want is essentially an external goal that the hero is pursuing. External meaning it's outside of themselves. It's not closure, it's not forgiveness, it's not happiness, because those are internal goals. We want something external and tangible that the hero is pursuing that we, the reader, can track and follow along with. And we'll see in our examples what that means. The need, on the other hand, is an internal change that needs to occur by the end of the story. That's essentially our transformation. But we're not really focused on the transformation at this point because we're still only 20% of the way to the story. So at this point, we want our hero making proactive decisions, but we want them to be motivated by something external, an external want. The need will come later. And that's exactly why we call Act 2, or why I like to call Act 2, fixing things the wrong way. Are they really, really changing the right way at this moment? No, they're going to do that later. Right now, they are changing, but not exactly the right way. So we call it fixing things the wrong way. It's not a moral judgment. It just means it's not really the answer or the point of the story. Now, when heroes fix things the wrong way and when they pursue something active, it usually comes with some sort of new or modified goal that they need to pursue. And when we set up a goal at the break into two, I can't tell you how many problems this solves for the rest of the story. If you're having trouble with your Act 2, if you're writing your Act 2, go back to this moment and ask yourself, what is the tangible thing that my hero is pursuing from this point forward? If you can't identify it, that's probably the source of your problems. So identifying a tangible external Act 2 goal for the hero to pursue from this point forward is essential. And I call it the Act 2 goal. And it's going to drive your plot forward, give you something to write, give your hero something to do, and most important, give your reader a reason to keep reading. So let's take a look at our examples. By the way, I'm doing 2 examples here, and then we're going to put everything together at the end with a 3rd example. So Katniss arrives by train and in the capital as a tribute. This is the break into two moment. And she is basically left, she's crossed the threshold from Act 1, District 12, and into Act 2, the capital. They are very different. We know this. Now, after seeing Peeta wave to the crowd already playing the game, she decides in this moment not to trust him. What is her Act 2 goal? Well, she wants to win the Hunger Games. That's a pretty easy goal to identify. Another reason why I love talking about this book. All of the beats are so easy to identify. It's a very tangible goal. We know exactly when she wins the Hunger Games or if she loses the Hunger Games. Now, note she's not there in the capital because she wants to take a stand and prove that they don't own her. That's essentially what she needs, and she will get there by the end. Right now, she just is there because she wants to protect Prim and her family. That's what she wants. It's not a bad thing to want. It's just not the point of the story. It's not what she really needs to learn by the end. And in our quieter, more contemporary story, we see Laura Jean decides to start a fake relationship with Peter Kavinsky. Now, she's not doing this because she's learned to embrace change and live in the real world instead of her imagination. No, that's going to come way later. In fact, she's just started an imaginary relationship. It's definitely fixing things the wrong way. She's only doing this because she wants to save face with Josh, who received the letter accidentally, and try to keep things the same. She's desperately trying to keep her life from spiraling out of control. So this is a great example of fixing things the wrong way. But we also get a great Act 2 goal here. She wants to convince everyone, especially Josh and Genevieve, which is Peter's ex, that they are really a couple. And when they do, that's tangible. It's trackable. When they do convince these people that they're really a couple, we know that they are achieving their goal. So we saw Act 1, we saw Laura Jean's life as this reserved, sort of naive girl who's never had a boyfriend. And now we're thrust into Act 2, which feels very different because now Laura Jean is in a fake relationship with the most popular boy in school. Suddenly she's the highlighted, she's in the spotlight. It is very, very different. And note, she hasn't gone anywhere. She hasn't gone to a new school. She hasn't changed houses, but her life has completely been turned upside down in the upside down world. All right, which brings us to our third foundation beat, the midpoint. Around halfway through the story, 50%, literally the middle of the novel, we reach a sort of crossroads of the story. In the pursuit of Act 2 goal, this is the moment where that goal culminates in either a false victory, what we call a false victory, meaning the hero has thus far been succeeding or has achieved their goal, or maybe is coming close to achieve their goal, the achievement is in sight, or a false defeat, meaning the hero has been floundering so far and has not achieved their goal, or the failure is in sight. These are your two options for the midpoint. And because the midpoint is a crossroads, this is where we're actually going to switch the direction of the plot. So a false victory is going to start leading into a downward path for your hero in the next part of the story, while a false defeat is going to start leading into an upward, but things are getting better part of the story. Because something big needs to happen here to raise the stakes of the story and push the hero in a new direction. Why a new direction? Well, because Act 2 is very, very long. And if we have everything going the exact same way the whole time, it gets very, very boring and predictable. This is the purpose of the midpoint, is to shift the direction of the plot. So some popular choices for forcing the hero out of into a new direction and forcing the plot to change once again is to introduce things like plot twists, ticking clocks, shocking reveals, a ramp up of the love story, a public event, or the hero having to step out into public in some way. These are all things that keep the hero from moving backward and push them into moving forward. Because this is a stakes raising moment and we are shifting the direction of the plot, we often see the goal change here. Not always, but sometimes. Or at least we see some sort of renewal of the motivation to achieve the goal. But you'll often see new or modified goals happening right after the midpoint because we are shifting the direction of the plot. But what's really important to note, no matter how you change or renew your goal, is that what's happening next, what's happening actually here, is that we are shifting the story and shifting the hero ever so gradually away from what they want, that external thing we established, and closer toward in the direction of what they need, what they eventually need to do to transform. Let's look at our examples. So in the Hunger Games, we had a false defeat, right? Or we have a false defeat. Basically, Katniss has been chased up a tree and is about to be killed by the career tributes. It looks like her goal of surviving the Hunger Games is going to fail. She's going to die. Obviously, she doesn't die. But false defeat, but it feels like a defeat at this moment. Then the stakes are raised when Peeta, the boy she vowed not to trust, risks his life to save her. Suddenly, this changes things in her mind. This raises the stakes of her emotional story. It leads her to wonder if maybe he can be trusted, and challenges a lot of those beliefs she's held for a long time about not trusting others. So followed shortly after this, she establishes a new goal. She teams up with Rue to blow up the supplies of the career tributes. She still has the goal of winning the Hunger Games, but we have this kind of modification, this new way of approaching the goal. And that's how we feel that the plot is moving and changing. And in To All the Boys I've Loved Before, we actually see a false victory at the midpoint. At a party, Genevieve storms out after seeing Laura Jean and Peter together because she's jealous of the two of them. So we can assume that the goal of convincing everyone that they're a real couple is a success. We have a victory. But then the stakes are raised when Peter and Genevieve have this big fight, which convinces Laura Jean that he might still have feelings for his ex. Why does Laura Jean care if it's a fake relationship? Well, here's where we start to realize that she might be developing real feelings for Peter. And there's where we see the shift from the fake relationship to the start of a real one. She's leaving that imaginary world behind and moving closer toward accepting reality. She's not quite there yet, but we see that shift happen right here at the midpoint. Laura Jean then admits to Peter at that party that being in a real relationship is scary. Once again, we're seeing her move closer to her actual transformation. But before the hero can achieve that ultimate transformation, unfortunately, we have to bring them very, very low. At the 75%, 3/4 of the way through the story mark, we hit the lowest point of the novel. This is an external, once again, action beat that happens to the hero where something pushes them to rock bottom. It usually comes in the form of some kind of defeat, some kind of failure to achieve a goal, or the loss of something very, very important. And the other thing you'll often see with the all is lost moment is what we call a whiff of death, or a hint of death, or a suggestion of death. Sometimes it's a literal death. Sometimes people actually die here. Pets die here. Mentors die here. Parents die here. Characters will often die at the all is lost, but it doesn't have to be a literal death. It can be a metaphorical death. It can be the death of a relationship, the death of an idea, the death of a business. It doesn't really matter. The idea behind the whiff of death is not just to callously kill off characters because it works and I told you to do so. The idea is that we are symbolizing death because it is also what leads to rebirth. So the death of something, literal or metaphorical, is symbolizing the death of the old hero and the old way of thinking so that the new hero and the new way of thinking can be reborn anew. And that is essentially why we include this whiff of death, because death precedes rebirth. So this is the moment that will trigger the biggest moment of growth for the story. And that's why we have to bring them so low. People, humans, heroes, they don't change unless they hit rock bottom first. So here it is. So that biggest moment of growth is coming up. Here's some examples for the all is lost. In the Hunger Games, after successfully blowing up the supplies of the careers, that was an achievement of their goal, Rue is caught in a trap and killed by another tribute. So we have a literal death here, but it is one of the most important deaths, I would argue, of the entire series, because it is the death that triggers Katniss's grief and basically pushes her to realize that she has to do something to defy the capital. They cannot get away with this kind of injustice any longer. It is the death that triggers her to start to rebel. And I would argue it is the death that actually triggers her to do everything that she does in the series. So that's why these kinds of things are important, these rock bottoms, because they are triggering huge moments of growth. And for Katniss, as she buries Rue in flowers, this is her first outward act of defiance against the capital, public act of defiance. Now, and to all the boys you love, I've loved before, we don't have a literal death. As I said, it's a little quieter story. The stakes are not quite as large as the Hunger Games. This is where Josh tells Lara Jean that he disapproves of her relationship with Peter, which triggers a huge fight between them. And he admits his real feelings for her, which absolutely crushes her. Then they kiss and she runs to her room, lamenting the fact that she just kissed her sister's ex, and cheated on her fake boyfriend in one scene. That's her rock bottom. As we see, it feels very different than a rock bottom from a big high stakes sci-fi novel. But essentially her whiff of death is the death of that sisterly bond that has really been part of her life for a long time. She has betrayed her sister, and the death of a fake relationship, as we will predict. All right. So, but as I said, the all is lost is going to trigger a huge moment of growth. It triggers an aha moment for your hero that inspires the biggest proactive decision yet. And that is what the break into 3 is. At the 80% mark, there should feel like some kind of solution or resolution where the hero breaks through, realizes what they need to do, not only to fix all the problems from Act 2, and there probably is plenty, but also, maybe more important, to fix themselves. This is where they discover what they actually need, not what they want, not what they've been chasing for the whole second act, but what they really need. And it usually comes in the form of a life lesson learned, a fear conquered, a wound healed, a worldview transformed, or even a personal flaw overcome. These are the things that make up really great resonating stories, when the hero transforms. And this is the moment where it happens, which is why we call the Act 3 world the synthesis world, because it's who the hero was in Act 1, all flaws and problems and everything, plus what they've learned through their journey in Act 2, equals who they will become in, missing the 3 there, in Act 3. We also call Act 3 fixing things the right way, for now obvious reasons. And because we have this sort of new way of doing things, once again, we will often see the goal change yet again here, or maybe just modified again. But because the hero now has a new perspective on life and themselves and how they're going to go about the next part of the story, we'll often see something new come about with their goal. And we call that the Act 3 goal. And you get to spend the rest of the story, the next 20% of the story, delivering on that goal. Okay, so in the Hunger Games, we see the break into 3 happen after the game makers announce that 2 tributes from the same district can win, and Katniss sets out to find Peeta. Her Act 3 goal is to find Peeta and win with him. What a difference an act makes. At the break into 2 is when she vowed not to trust him and to keep him at a distance. And now she's teaming up with him. That's how that real kind of cool juxtaposition between fixing things the wrong way, fixing things the right way, and really illustrating how much the hero has changed. So here she's letting down her guard and facing some of those trust issues. And also teaming up with Peeta is another step toward proving that the capital doesn't own her. Now, in our quieter contemporary story, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, after realizing that she doesn't love Josh anymore, there's her aha moment, Lara Jean decides she wants to be with Peter, not in a fake relationship, in a real relationship, and she runs off to find him. I even pulled a quote, "I don't want to be afraid anymore. I want to be brave." There's that conquering of that fear, that facing what she really needs. And her Act 3 goal becomes to be in a real relationship with Peter, which we see play out in the next 20% of the novel. Notice the mirror to Act 2, fake relationship, real relationship, fixing things the wrong way, fixing things the right way. Those mirrors create that kind of really beautiful balance of structure. All right, so actually both of these novels are broken down in their entirety, 15-beat entirety in Save the Cat Writes, a young adult novel. You can read all of the details of all 15 beats. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. okay, those books were written with one hero, one point of view. It's a little simpler, right? What if I'm writing multiple heroes with multiple points of view? How do I juggle my 5 beats then? I'm glad you asked. That's what I'm going to talk about next. What about multiple points of view? This is a question I get asked so often that I actually dedicate a huge portion of the new book to multiple points of view. Not just because a lot of people ask, but because it's a very, very popular choice in young adult. So when writing multiple points of view and juggling a structure method like Save the Cat, you essentially have 3 options. You have what's called a single track beat sheet, which means that you're writing one beat sheet and all of the points of view, all of the heroes are sharing all of the beats, meaning they're having the same catalyst, the same break into 2, the same midpoint. These beats are probably going to affect them differently because they're different characters with different transformations and different problems and all of that. But they're essentially on the same track. They are following the same beats. I also like to call this a team beat sheet. 6 of Crows is a great example of a team beat sheet that I break down in the new Save the Cat book. Multi-track beat sheets are when you have a beat sheet for every single POV, which basically means that the POVs don't share beats. Yes, they can be in scenes together and they can overlap, but they're going to have their own sets of beats, their own catalysts, their own breaks into 2. They may not even happen at the same time. They might be staggered. You're basically on multiple railroad tracks and each following their own track. And then there's the probably most popular option, which is the blended track beat sheet. And that's a combination of the 2, where the POVs will share some beats and not others. They might have their own separate catalysts, but come together at the midpoint, then separate again. So essentially, in blended track beat sheets, you have beat sheets that merge and diverge throughout the story. This can be the most confusing one to write and most complex, but it's also the most, for me, the most rewarding to write because it's like a giant puzzle. And we're going to look at an example of this blended track beat sheet. We'll pick 2 POVs to keep things a little simpler, but I'm going to talk about The Sun is Also a Star and put all 5 beats together so you can see how it works in a real example. So this is a dual POV YA romance that has a blended track beat sheet. All right, so in the catalyst of The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon, we see Daniel and Natasha meeting up. This is the first time they meet. It's a joint catalyst. They experience the catalyst together. It is the exact same beat that affects both of them. It sets off a chain of events that's going to change the trajectory of both of their lives and their story, which is why we define it as the catalyst. Because neither of their lives will be the same after this moment. Both will eventually help the other with the challenges they're facing, and all of that can be tracked down to the catalyst. So in the story, Natasha is dealing with her family's looming deportation, and Daniel is dealing with the question of whether to reject his parents' planned future for him. When we reach the break into 2, Daniel invites Natasha to have coffee with him, and she says yes. This is a joint beat. It is the same scene, and it is the same moment where they're both proactively deciding to meet up for coffee and go for a date. So essentially in this book, the Act 1 world is life before the relationship, and we saw their beats on separate tracks before this moment. And the Act 2 world is life in the relationship. And often this is what you'll see in romance novels. You'll see that's how we define the upside down Act 2 world, is now they're in a relationship, and that is different and that is new. It certainly is for these 2. But the date gets off to a rocky start, as we see in this scene. And when Natasha claims she doesn't believe in love, Daniel says he can get her to fall in love with him in one day. That sounds suspiciously like an Act 2 goal. And there we have such a brilliant use of goals being used here by Nicola Yoon. She's taken love and she's given it a tangible goal. I can get you to fall in love with me. I have a scientific study and quiz that we're going to do throughout this day, and we get a trackable goal. It's quite brilliant. It's why I love this book. Structure. At the midpoint, after spending a good part of the day together, Natasha and Daniel share a passionate kiss in a noraebang, which is a Korean karaoke room, so we feel like this is a false victory. It seems like the goal is working, but the stakes are raised when Natasha realizes, I can't fall in love with Daniel. I might be leaving the country tonight. I might be deported tonight. This eventually leads to a fight that splits them and their beat sheets apart, and they spend the next part of the beat sheet actually separately. But their beats join back up again at the all is lost when Natasha's immigration lawyer, Jeremy Fitzgerald, is not able to stop Natasha's deportation. This is a joint beat because it feels like a loss for both of them. It is the thing that's going to end their relationship. She will essentially have to leave tonight. Now, Natasha, this is affecting them in slightly different ways, but it's the same beat. Natasha feels more out of control than ever, and Daniel feels cheated by fate. The whiff of death here is the death of their relationship, or maybe even the death of the dream of being together. At the break into three, we actually see separate beats. They are split apart to have their own breaks into three. Even though they actually are together in this moment, they are having different experiences. Daniel, after realizing that Jeremy Fitzgerald, who is also his Yale interviewer, thanks to fate, is not happy, even after following the right life track, which is his aha moment. Daniel realizes this and walks out of his Yale interview, effectively derailing his life. He vows to be with Natasha for as long as he can before she's forced to leave. This is his Act 3 goal. He takes control of his own life instead of doing what his parents want him to do. And here's where we see that need coming about. On the other hand, Natasha, after realizing how much Daniel has taught her throughout the day, in her aha moment, she goes home to confront her father, which is the true source of her struggle, not the deportation. And that becomes her Act 3 goal. So she accepts that the deportation was something that was out of her control and not the true source of her pain and anger. And that's exactly what she needed to learn by the end. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper into this beat sheet, I break it down in its full entirety, 15 beats, in my free bonus ebook. And I will tell you how you can get that. Essentially, we had a pre-order offer that ended Monday, where you could get 5 bonus beat sheets, 100 extra pages of content. And after getting an overwhelming amount of response, people wanting to get the beat sheets after the book came out, we have extended it until July 29th. So if you go to jessicabrody.com/preorder and you purchase the book in any format from any retailer and upload your receipt, you will get a companion ebook with 100 pages of extra content. This includes 5 more full beat sheet breakdowns for The Sun Is Also a Star, Long Way Down, a novel in verse by Jason Reynolds, which is a fantastic award-winning novel. I think it was a National Book Award finalist. Red Queen, here's a great example for a fantasy, for those fantasy writers out there. High fantasy YA novel called Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard is in there. We Were Liars is a psychological thriller with an unreliable narrator. So that was an experiment I wanted to do, is break down a beat sheet with an unreliable narrator. And The Inheritance Games is a YA mystery that is also in there. So you can get all 5 of those beat sheets. They are not in the book. They are not available anywhere else except for in this offer. Also, on top of that, because we love our indie bookstores, I have an indie bookseller bonus. If you order a paperback from an indie bookstore, not only do you get the 5 bonus beat sheets, you also get a free ticket to a live plot along workshop I'm doing next month. This is a one-time only event. It's 2 hours virtual, where I'm going to plot a brand new YA novel from scratch using my own book. So I'm going to show you exactly how I approach the plotting process. You'll be able to collaborate on the process by voting on ideas and plot details. It's going to be very collaborative. And of course, you can plot your own novel with me. That's going to be on August 12th, and you'll get an access to a recording for 30 days. So if you're interested in that, please purchase the book before July 29th, upload your proof of purchase at this link, and you'll get all of these yummy goodies. Now, if you're not living in the US and you would still like to attend the workshop, I've listed on that link, I've listed some indie booksellers that will ship internationally, and this is open to all of you. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much for your time and for inviting me on to give this presentation.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I learned so much about plot. And one thing that I always enjoy, both in your presentations and the book itself, is just how you break down novels and analyze the plot of different novels. And this is I should tell people that I actually read your book every year before NaNoWriMo as a brainstorming tool.
Really?
And it also reminded me that, hey, this is a pretty good time to prepare for NaNoWriMo 2023. So, you can start
Never too
reading
soon.
these, this plot analysis and plotting your own novel. And your upcoming webcast looks amazing. So that's a great Nano Prep event as well. So I'm going to dive in. We got a bunch of questions. We got about 11 minutes. A couple people asked about, well, that Malin tries. I'm going to ask this question on behalf of a number of writers. What sort of new things and new answers can we expect in this book? I know you answered this a little bit, but maybe if you could just focus on the top reasons. Is there a way to tell if we need it, if we already have the first book?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one I have expected to come.
yeah.
So the new book, I think one of the biggest reasons I think the new book is useful is because it's full of all brand new examples. And the only reason I understand plot is because I analyze examples over and over and over. I really think that analyzing other stories makes us a better writer. So this gives you an opportunity to break open hundreds of new novels and see how they work, because you really never know what one of those novels is going to make your novel like click into place in your mind. So that's one great reason I think that people might like this new book. The other one is, as I mentioned, is there was a lot of things that come up in questions that I didn't dive deep enough in the first book. Multiple POV, as I mentioned. So there's an entire section about multiple POV. I also have 3 examples, full beat sheet examples of multiple points of view so that you can really see how they work. One of them is a 3 POV blended track beat sheet with 3 5-point finales that are all interwoven together. It's a structural masterpiece, and I had so much fun breaking it down. So that. And then I think the biggest one that everyone's always asking me that I didn't get a chance to really explore deeply in the first book is about series. How do you use Save the Cat to write a series? So I have an entire chapter about using Save the Cat to write a series with some series breakdowns. And then there's just a lot of other like customizations. Like what happens when my catalyst comes on the first page? And what happens when I use a prologue and flashbacks? And what about an antagonist story? I take all of those questions and I really dive deep into them with examples so that hopefully this is can be a next level story structure dive for a lot of writers.
So it sounds like this goes beyond the young adult genre, actually. Like this can benefit people who write in other genres.
It kind of does. I mean, I use young adult as the lens, as this is what we're studying. But the things that I'm unveiling here and that I kind of unlocked for myself, they apply to all novels. It's structure. It's just structure. And one of the things I really love doing is I knew this book had to feel different. So I loved kind of looking at the beats from slightly different angle and explaining them in a slightly different way. Because every time I do a webinar, I say something different. You never know what's going to come out of my mouth. So, I think the more you hear these things, the more you read these things, and the more you absorb structure and people talking about structure, the more it's gonna click in your head.
Absolutely. Like I said at the beginning of the webcast, great storytellers aren't necessarily born. You can read these books of your favorite authors and think they're just natural storytellers, but really they've developed those muscles over time. And they've done what you've done, is like read their favorite novels and study them and analyze the beats or the structure of them. And on that note, I'm curious. You've evaluated several new novels in this book. Are there any ones that really stood out for you? Like, what did you learn from them in particular that you might apply to your own writing, or just things that you did, top advice for viewers?
Such a great question. Well, I mean, when I broke down Children of Blood and Bone, which is the masterful 3.3 POV thing, and I was sort of forced to make sense of it structurally, and lay it out in a way that would hopefully help people. That was so illuminating to me of how, when you really look at what she's done, Toni Amiemi has done in this book, you can see just how one beat sheet is triggering the other, is creating conflict for the other. Like one person's goal becomes the other person's conflict. And it's so brilliantly put together. And it's something I didn't notice the first time I read it. I just thought, this is a really good book. But then when I really peel it back, I'm like, I can see what she did. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm a super structure nerd, as you can tell, but I just like light bulbs going off like, okay, I see why she did that. Same thing with Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, has been one of my favorite books forever. And I couldn't wait to break it down. I knew right away it was like the first book I picked for this book. It's like, I'm doing Six of Crows because I love Leigh Bardugo. I think she's so talented, and I wanted to know, how does she do it? And obviously we all can't be Leigh Bardugo, but we can study what she's done and learn from that. And I think one of the things I learned was just the way that she has developed characters that feel so different, and they're all on the same journey, and they're all having all these miraculous different transformations. That was also very inspiring.
Cool. Well, you mentioned, I love that you headed off the question about different points of view or multiple points of view. That was great to know that that's in this new book. And you mentioned also that you cover series, and that is one question here is, does the book cover how to use the method for duologies and trilogies? So I wondered if you wanted to touch on that and go a little bit deeper.
Sure. Yeah, I break down a duology, which actually I'll just tell you, it's the Six of Crows duology. I break down the whole structure of the whole series. I break down two trilogies, the Hunger Games trilogy and the To All the Boys I've Loved Before trilogy. So you can see really like a sci-fi trilogy and like more of a contemporary trilogy. I break down a tetralogy, which is a 4-book series or quartet. I chose the Lunar Chronicles. I break down that entire series in with all the beats. And then I even go even further and show you how to break down 5-book, 6-book, 7-book series and how you can kind of use the beats that we talk about today, the foundation beats, to lay the groundwork of your series. And then I go even deeper and talk about what other stuff is happening in a series. How do you make sure that your series is growing and expanding, but at the same time telling a story of transformation across multiple books? And that, of course, again, was just really enlightening for me to see how other writers are doing that too.
Yeah, that's great. I can't wait to read that in more depth. So aspiring writer asks, do we need to follow all 15 beats? Some of those beats on the screen don't really fit with my story. You need all
Great.
15? Can you skip a couple?
That's a good question. I'm always like really hesitant to say what you can and can't do. You know, what I've done is I've shown you what exists out there in stories that are working today. That doesn't mean that you can't do your own thing in it and people are going to love it. That absolutely doesn't mean that. So I without reading your story, I can't really say like, oh yeah, no, you don't need that beat. So it's sort of a weird thing for me to say to you. I will just say that, you know, in my experience in reading books, all the beats are in there. In reading all of the books that I've read and loved, the beats are in there. Do they sometimes move around a little bit? Yeah, like the catalyst sometimes moves up. The theme stated sometimes comes later. The B story characters sometimes introduced in Act 1. But the rest of the beats, they're pretty much there. It's kind of like what makes up the story. But again, you know, it's like you do you and you write your story. And then if you are having, you know, if you are getting feedback from writers that you want to address, this might be a good place to look for advice. And that's pretty much all I feel comfortable telling you from this distance.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have a question. It's kind of interesting because like I know this book would definitely appeal to planners and plotters, you know, people who like having their novel outlined ahead of time. But this question is if we're starting to get stalled at the midpoint of a pantsed draft, is it better to keep pushing and go for structure on a revision or pause on new writing to analyze the existing draft for structure? So how can this work for pantsers? Can it?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely can. And I won't get too far into it because we did another webinar with NaNoWriMo all about how to take this method and use it as a revising tool. So check out Nano's YouTube channel for that webinar that I did last year or this year. But this is a cool question. I really like this question of, yeah, what do I do? What do I do when I'm stuck? Because we all get stuck. We all get stuck at places. So first of all, I just want to tell you, you're stuck. It's normal. We all get stuck. You have those two options. You can push forward and try to finish what you have. You can go back and look at structure and see, you know, try to fix what you have. The danger I find with going back from the middle is that we tend to then get stuck in revisions and we don't move forward. I'm a huge fan, whether you're a plotter or a pantser, in just getting through the first draft, even if it's just the crappiest draft ever. And here's the reason why. One is it keeps you writing forward, not backwards. Two is it ensures that by the end, you actually have things to work with. It can be very easy to go back to the beginning of a novel when you only have half of it done, and then have all these new ideas. And then you get to the midpoint again and you realize, oh, actually, I want to do it differently. And we can get stuck in sort of a revision loop that way. But when you have finished the novel, which can be challenging to push yourself through, absolutely. When you finished it, you have so much more information about the story. You have so much more insight about the characters. Even if they all change, at least you have things that you can work with and you have insights that you can work with, which I think are more valuable than going back and trying to fix something in the middle. I hope that helps. But again, it's sort of like you do you and you do what works for you. But that would be my advice to anyone who's stuck somewhere, is just keep going and then fix it later.
I think that's great advice, especially in a first draft.
Yeah.
Janine Batiste asks in Save the Cat writes a YA novel. You talk about series catalysts near the end of book one. Do they have to be in act 3 of book 1, or can they be at the Olive Lost break into 3 of book 1?
Oh, someone's already read the series chapter.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. Did you get the book and go right to the series chapter, or have you read this whole thing? That's, wow, impressive.
Yeah.
Great question, super specific. But no, I would say that an All Is Lost of book 1 would make an excellent series catalyst. So I think, yeah, coming towards the end of book 1 is probably a good idea. A midpoint of book 1 being the catalyst maybe feels a little early to me, but again, you do you. But it sounds like you're on the right track, and I think that makes sense, what you just said, what the writer just said. And I'm super and A+ to you for already having read that and digesting it and having another question. I love it.
Maybe it's one of those. I saw a lot of good reviews on Goodreads from people who read the book before it was released yesterday. So there's some people out there. Yeah. This is here's a question. KB Archer asked this, but this could be my question. So maybe this will be our last question today.
Okay.
Because we're at time. But the question is, how do you know when you're spending too much time in the hero's head versus focusing on the plot?
Oh, this is such a good question. And I have so much to say about it. Okay. I'm going to give you sort of 2 tips. One is very broad, and then I'm going to give you a more specific tip on how to implement my broad tip. So broadly speaking, we want to make sure that every scene in our novel has action. That we're not having an entire chapter or scene where the hero is literally just thinking about things. That can be very, very problematic. Because it just completely derails the story. It completely slows the pacing. It's very hard to keep momentum up when you take 3, 4, 5, 6 pages for the hero just to think. So that's kind of the broader answer, is to always make sure that the thinking is happening within action. So, instead of having your hero sit down to think, can they think while they're running from the bad guys? Or can they think while they're trying to, decode the secret message or whatever they're doing? So always finding ways to put reflection into action, I think, is just a great strategy. And then another strategy that I love teaching, and it's something I developed when I was developing my revision course, which you can check out on my website if you're interested, is this thing that I call the color coding. So what I will do, and I will usually do this way later in the revision process, not in the first draft, because it would drive me nuts. But once I sort of have my structure in place, I will go scene by scene through my novel, and I will start color coding the scenes. What that means is you choose one color to highlight all the action in. Like, all the dialogue is in one color. All of the physical action where people are moving through space is in a different color. All of the characters' reflection, things that are happening inside their head, is highlighted in a different color. And then all of your sort of descriptions are in a different color. And what this does is it immediately illuminates where your imbalances are. If you have 3 pages of yellow reflection, you're like, okay, I've got to reorganize this scene. And sometimes it's just a matter of weaving in action or moving the action around or breaking the reflection up so that it fits better into the scene. But color coding has been a game changer for me, because it shows you where your weaknesses are. It shows you on the screen in color where you are relying too heavily on any one element. Some people write too much action and don't have enough reflection, and they have to go weave in the reflection. But either way, it's a great tool that I would highly recommend you try.
I love that. I'm going to be scared to do that to one of my novels.
It is a little scary.
Reflection for page after page after page, but that's really great advice. And we are unfortunately at time. We didn't get to all the questions, but thank you so much, Jessica. I think I want to end, though. You gave us so much information. Is there anything that you want to impart to people as a reminder about what's coming next?
What's coming next is I'm taking a big long break. No, I mean I'm very tired after writing this book for 3 years and now releasing it. But what's coming next for you all is I hope that you will read the book and definitely take advantage of those extra beat sheets. Then if you are coming to my plot along workshop next month, I hope to see you there. Anything you want to know, any extra stuff you want, jessicabrody.com is your hub. I also am the founder of writingmastery.com. You can go there, get free writing tips, find lots of courses and other helpful resources for writers. But most of all, I'm just so excited to have this book in your hands. People are reading it and it's very exciting. So as I sign off, everything is just go forth and tell really, really beautiful tales. And that's all I want from you.
Good advice. And everyone get the book, go to Jessica's upcoming webcast, get ready for NaNoWriMo 2023. That's what I'm going to lead with. Go forth and tell a really great tale. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.